Welcome back to the Canadian Ruck, everybody. This is Jamie Gray. This pod, we're fortunate to welcome Dr. Maria Gallo. Maria had 55 caps with Canada. She was on the Rugby World Cup squads back in 02, 06, and 2010. She was also a member of Canada's national bobsled team for 2 years back in 03, 04. That's pretty cool. She's also Rugby World Cup sevens in 2009. She studied at Guelph, winning national championships. I think it was like 97, 98, 99, 2000. Along with the University of Alberta thrown in there as well, Female Athlete of the Year honors. Inducted into Rugby Canada's Hall of Fame back in 2018, just a few years ago. Currently Canada's women's assistant coach, and she's a prof at UBC in the kinesiology department, where she also coaches the Thunderbirds. So coming up soon will be Maria Gallo. Very fortunate and lucky to have her on. As always, got to give ourselves a little plug. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the information there. But if you're not, if you're listening, if you're on Spotify or iTunes or Google Podcasts, wherever you get your pods, just know that we are all over social media. We're on Twitter at Canadian Ruck, Instagram _Canadian_Ruck, Facebook at the Canadian Ruck, and our email is thecanadianruck@gmail.com. As I said, you hear where we play. You can watch us on the YouTube. Make sure when you watch and listen, you also follow and subscribe. And beyond that, share it. Derek Daypuck was our last guest, and he had a lot of shares, which was great. It's great when we can hear these stories, especially unsung heroes like Derek and others. And it's also nice because it vaulted the Canadian Ruck to 4 days straight as the #1 rugby podcast in Canada to start February, which was really cool. So thank you, Derek, for your great conversation. All else fails, you're not sure where to go, check us out online at the CanadianRuck.weebly.com. We have everything hosted there with links and photos and et cetera, but that is all on the website. I'm going to take a look briefly at some rugby news. Obviously, it is, I say obviously, but you don't know what I'm talking about. It is Saturday morning, and the Six Nations are kicking off. So as I'm recording this intro, in the background, I've got Italy and France. Right now, they're doing their national anthems. So we're looking forward to that. But the Six Nations kicks off today and tomorrow. I'm not sure about you, but as you've noticed, I've re-upped my DAZN subscription so I can watch the Six Nations. So today, Italy v France. As I said, they're singing their anthems right now. Coming up in a couple hours, England, Scotland. I'm more of a Scottish fan by nature, but I think England's going to win. I'm not an England. I like Johnny Wilkinson. Beyond that, I'm not really sure. And sorry if that offends anybody. And then tomorrow on Sunday, Wales v Ireland. I think that's a 10 a.m. Eastern kickoff. So 11:15 here in the Maritimes, 10:15 in other parts of Canada. You can do the timetable conversion. I'm really not good at timetables, but it's there, and that'll be an interesting one. Wales have been struggling the last couple of years. Ireland's getting a little long in the tooth, but they both play very competitive games, so that'll be an interesting one to watch tomorrow. Summer test window. So I was reading an article yesterday. World Rugby Vice Chairman Bernard Laporte stated this week that a decision on July's test windows, including the British and Irish Lion Tour South Africa, will be made by the end of the month. The tours in question at this time are France traveling to Australia. Aussies, like Canada, have a closed border with a 14-day quarantine. Italy traveling to New Zealand. New Zealand also has closed borders, that 14-day quarantine. And from my understanding, from chatting with a couple in New Zealand, in order to get New Zealand, you also have to pay a $4,000 entrance fee. So 14-day quarantine plus a $4,000 entrance fee. So that could add up with a rugby club. And of course, the Lions tour to South Africa, and that one's, we've talked about it a couple of times. It's all over social media. It's all over rugby news everywhere. South Africa has been ravaged with over 1.4 million COVID cases, and currently there are a little over 45,000 deaths. So it's a tough spot to try and put a Lions tour into South Africa. Laporte also stated that we decided at World Rugby to firstly take a decision if the tours will take place or not at the end of March, because we need time to turn things around, but I sincerely think France will go to Australia and Italy will go to New Zealand. Seeing there the two trips posing questions. The Lions too, of course. I'm not sure what he means by that. I think he just means that the Lions tour is going to go ahead, but it might not be to South Africa. And the Lions tour, as part of the speculation, may happen in the UK. And as we also know, Australia has even offered to host, splitting some revenue costs there, revenue shares. If the tours are canceled, He also stated that they're preparing for another edition of the Autumn's Nations Cup, which was a interesting and I think somewhat successful tour last year. Laporte finally added, like we did last season, if they tell us you can't go to the Southern Hemisphere and they can't come here, we can talk and say, why not play friendlies between us? Friendlies would be there to make money and because a coach needs games 2 years out from a Rugby World Cup. So Laporte's pretty confident that some internationals can get played. Might be, probably won't be in the same atmosphere as they have been in years past, but he's confident something can happen. On the local front, as most of you, or probably all of you know at this point, the Toronto Arrows are starting their season based out of Atlanta. Mark Winnicor, the COO and general manager of the Toronto Arrows, said, our organization has worked closely with public health officials at various levels over the past several months to consider plans that would allow us to begin our 2021 season on home soil. However, the ongoing public health situation facing Canadians, along with the pressing needs to determine where we will play our home matches, has dictated that we will start our 2021 season in the U.S. And naturally, the Arrows fans, Canada would prefer that they start at home this season, but it's not happening. There's a possibility later in the year, depending on vaccinations, border restrictions, playoff schedules, etc. They might be able to come back. Sometimes, though, it is difficult to see when sports are being played while living in a pandemic. With all the other things happening in the world, it's hard to fathom, is sport that important? Asking that question, a couple of things come to mind. Sport gives us a sense of normalcy, gives us a sense of purpose. It gives us the realization that better days are coming. The understanding that sport is an important part of life. Just last week, I read an article about a high school football player in Maine who committed suicide because of losing the ability to play games. That personal loss of not being able to play games just overtook him. It's a very heartbreaking read. We here at the Canadian Ruck wish the Arrows players, coaches, admin, trainers, etc., a full season of good health on and off the pitch, free from injury and free from the COVID. The Arrows' first match of the year is on the road, and I have that in quotations, March 20th versus Rugby Atlanta. And their first home game, again in quotations, is on April 10th versus the LA Guillotines. Nothing further grayer this week, but I'm going to look at some of the stats from last week. It was I posed a question. France and Italy just kicked off there, so that's distracting me in the background there. But we're looking at the winning picks from social media. Threw it out on Twitter and Instagram. Who would be the winners of the opening matches this weekend? On Twitter, 100% voted France over Italy. Also on Twitter, 50-50 draw between England and Scotland. And also on Twitter, Ireland over Wales by 67% voting turnout. On Instagram, 95% voted France over Italy. And I questioned somebody why they chose Italy, and they just said, I really hate France. I was like, okay, fair enough. And England over the Scots at an 85% rate, and Ireland over Wales at 75%. So as we know, the game's kicked off. Let's see what happens. Let's see what the weekend holds. Enjoy some beautiful rugby, and hopefully there's some great matches, because I think everybody's been dying to see some internationals. All right, coming up now, we have Maria Gallo. Canadian Ruck welcomes Maria Gallo. Maria, we're very fortunate to have you here. Many caps with Canada, over 50, variety of World Cups. You were also on the Canada's national bobsled team for a couple of years. Just an amazing athlete. Rugby Canada's Hall of Fame in 2018. The list goes on and on. We're blessed to have you. So Maria, welcome. Welcome for joining us.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jamie, for having me on. You run a pretty cool podcast here, so I'm really proud to be a part of it.
Thanks, I really appreciate that. All right, let's jump in here, because we all want to hear your story. Let's hear your origin story. You were born in Argentina. What happened? Like, when did you move to Canada? How did you get involved in rugby? Talk about those national championships at Guelph. Very impressive. Like, let's hear who you are.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to date myself. I was born in 77.
You're still younger than me.
Thanks. About like fifth or sixth generation Argentinian. Half my family is like Italian immigrant. The other half is Spanish immigrant, which is not uncommon for Argentinians. Moved to Montreal when I was 9 years of age. Both of my parents were veterinarians. They owned a clinic. Things were going a bit sideways in the country in the mid 80s. So my dad took a big leap and followed a friend to McGill University to do a PhD. And so I basically, at the age of 9, with my 2 older brothers, I got 2 older brothers. We're all within 4 years of age. We'll get into my childhood probably a bit later, but it was a pretty wild childhood in Argentina. Lots of freedoms to do as we wished. And basically moved to Montreal when I was 9. I didn't speak any English, so we went into an immigrant school where we had to learn French. Quebec has that 101 law where any immigrant whose parents were not instructed in English have to learn French as their second language. So a bit of a struggle there in Montreal to learn the French, picked up English, basically watching Sesame Street or on the streets of Montreal. And then moved to Guelph, Ontario, just in grade 9. And that's in Guelph. I kind of call Guelph home because that's where I did my high school years at St. James High School, which is a Catholic high school. And then I also went to university there. And that's where I started playing my rugby. So the Guelph Rugby Club is my home club. That's where I first was taught the game of rugby. Jim Atkinson, who at the time was also coaching the varsity team at Guelph, was my first coach ever. Just a passionate man, Englishman, just loved the sport, made you bleed it. And he was my first introduction to it. I came from a soccer, kind of basketball, badminton background. I played every sport I could in high school.
Cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, I was a multi-sport athlete, and I really preach the multi-sport mindset. There's lots of transferable skills that you pick up from other sports that will make you a good rugby player at the end of the day. So I encourage, now as a coach, I encourage athletes to come from various backgrounds. So yeah, I played a lot of like high school sport, and then my first club team was for Guelph. And I literally started playing rugby the summer before my first year at the University of Guelph. So I was pretty green to the sport, very naive. Didn't probably know the rules to rugby until I was like 3 years into the sport. There's probably still some laws that I'm just not that familiar with. Every time I have to redo that World Rugby exams law, it just does my head in. But anyways.
Seems to change every time too.
Yeah. Me and my husband, who also is a rugby guy, the two of us together still have a hard time completing that examination. But yeah, so yeah, it was great 4 years. I did my undergrad at Guelph, as I mentioned, in biomedical sciences. I had aspirations to go to medical school, which changed after I got serious about rugby. But I had a great career at Guelph. I still chat with my friends that I played rugby 20 years ago. We had an amazing all-girls weekend getaway in the US before COVID hit. So we're still really tight. Some of my strongest friendships come from rugby. So after my 4 years at Guelph, I was kind of lost, didn't really know what to do. I knew I didn't want to go into medicine because that would have put an end to my rugby plans, and I was already on the national team by then. I think I made the national squad when I was about 21 years of age, and Rick Suggett was the head coach at the time, and I'm sure I'll get into some Rick Suggett stories later, but Sluggo, as most people know him. And then I took a year off because I was kind of lost and didn't know what to do. I was a professional dog walker in California, which is where my mom was living at the time. So I just went to hang out in LA for a couple months and then applied to grad school. That seemed to be the next natural step for me. And I got into the U of A. And it's funny because at the time, the Pandas and the Griffins were rivals. In 98, we won the very first university national tournament as Griffins, and then we lost it to the Pandas the next year. So when I went to the U of A, they didn't really like Maria Gallo. Like, there was somebody they had played against, probably somebody I trash talked on the field at some point. That's probably bound to happen. And but they were great. They received me with open arms. Obviously as a rookie, when you're 23 years of age, you just go through the paces. And after a season, I bonded with the Pandas, and I basically played out the rest of my varsity years with them. So I think in total, I must have played 7 university seasons because we didn't have that 5-year law or max rule at the time. And I played some great rugby with the Pandas. I was still on the national team. And at the time, I was doing a graduate degree, so a master's, which eventually led into a PhD. So one of the things that, if people know me well, I'm a bit of a nerd. I love academia. I basically hid in the university system as long as I possibly could. I'm still in the university system now as a professor. I live on campus. I just like that age bracket, right? Like the kind of 18 to 25-year-olds right now, you feel young, I don't feel relevant anymore, but you're just in that young kind of environment, and I find it to be a good place to be. So that kind of gives you a bit of what my path has been. I've always had rugby in school side by side. I've always managed to somehow juggle, school or work with rugby. It's been a permanent in my life ever since I began it at the age of 18. Yeah, I'm sure you'll ask some more questions about the rugby piece, but that's kind of a bit of a synopsis of where I started in 86, moving to Canada to where I am now in Vancouver. So I've slowly made my way through to the West Coast, where I live in Vancouver right now.
That's awesome. It's really interesting. You talk about the multi-sport athlete. I would just refer to you as an athlete. In my opinion, you're an athlete if you play more than one sport, and you're just, you're a basketball player if you only play basketball, or a rugby player if you only play rugby. So the fact that you played 3, 4, 5 sports every year growing up, very impressive. The fact that you won so many university championships at 2 different universities while playing nationally, while doing your undergrad, while doing your grad, while doing your PhD, like unreal drive and determination. And that's one thing that I love about athletics and I love about rugby players is that drive and determination to see things through. That drive and determination took you to the World Cups, a few different World Cups. You were in New Zealand, you had one in Edmonton. Talk to us about that. Like, you were a youngster at one, you were a seasoned vet in another one. How did that all shake down? Like, what were your nerves like? What were the experiences like?
Yeah, so my first World Cup would have been in Spain in 2002. I'd only probably been playing rugby for about 5 years or 6 years, and only about 3 years at a high level. So as a naive, cocky 21, 22-year-old, I loved the Spanish experience. I'm Spanish speaking, so I was the translator on the team as well. And, rugby, it wasn't what it's like now. Like, we didn't fill out stadiums as some of the women's games do now. So it was a lot more of a niche sport at the time. It was a pay-to-play model at the time as well. So if you wanted to represent Canada, you had to pay for a lot of your tours. And there was always hardships that came with that. But at the end of the day, we were super proud to represent the country. And some of the best squads I've ever been on were in those early years of my career. Edmonton was a unique experience because we were on home soil. And I was actually living in Edmonton at the time, going to the U of A. So it was kind of weird driving 10 minutes to the hotel, and here we are at the World Cup event. So it was hard to kind of get too motivated about the location, but it did make travel and the fans that were pouring into the small venues, that really felt like an exciting time, and we really could showcase Canadian rugby on Canadian soil. And I was just starting to have a bit of a leadership role within the team. I eventually was a vice captain along to Leslie Cripps, who was a captain. So I started to get some bigger responsibilities within the team, and I enjoyed those. I always challenged coaches. People that have coached me probably struggle with me because I always question why we do things. I'm not much of a follower. Or if I do, I need to know rationale and reasoning for it. So once I started to acquire some, knowledge in the field of exercise physiology, which is what my PhD was in, I'm sure I wasn't, what's the word, the easiest to coach when it came to some theories around periodization and
you're every coach's favorite player, right?
Well, they would say something that was like probably not right, and I would send them an article like, "Hey, you might want to catch up on the up-to-date science." Hopefully in a discreet manner. I have apologized to a couple of coaches since I started coaching. Wow. Yeah, not in a bad way. I was just a big mouth, right? But yeah, so Edmonton was awesome. Lost to France and Spain, so placed fourth. Lost to France and Edmonton, came fourth. So it was starting to get old, that fourth level finish. And we had the chances, I think, in England in 2010, which was my last World Cup. And we just had a series of unfortunate errors in some important games. We lost, we came sixth, lost to the US in that particular tournament. So, and there was always something that I took away from each major tournament, and there's something that I learned from each of the coaches at the time. And I had some experiences in Dubai with sevens in 2009, so that World Cup as well. And so, yeah, some fantastic wins, some hard losses, and just really enjoyed my experiences because every tournament you approach it very differently depending on your lens and your perspective at the time, right?
Yeah, but it's
Yeah,
interesting too, like as you span 3 World Cups, all on different continents. Sorry, not on different 2 different continents.
yeah.
And it's impressive to hear you talk about, you're not talking about the wins and losses. You talked a little bit about it, but you're talking more about the experience, which I think is more attuned to rugby than a lot of other sports. It's that
Yeah,
feeling of camaraderie and being like, can you talk about those shared experiences with some of your teammates? Anything in detail like that made those events special for you?
for sure. Like I'm not one of, we had a couple of teammates on the squad that were super analytical and can remember the score of a game 10 years ago and like this play happened in this minute and you know what I mean? So I don't have those types of memories. I more remember, emotions related to some of the major events. And when I think back of my rugby experiences, a lot of my good memories came off field, right? The culture that we would create around a particular tournament. We used to play silly games. We used to pull pranks on each other. It wasn't as maybe professional as it is now. And so that offered us some freedoms to kind of, have some fun with it. And that's one of the things I think is it's missing in the game now is it's, and sometimes not too professional because you can't ever be too professional, but I think sometimes athletes, need to go back to having some fun and playing the sport, even if you are playing it at a high level. So we used to have what Easter egg hunts kind of where we're all in costume and stuff, or we had skit night. Like those were my best memories with Sluggo is he would put us into groups and force us to make a skit, and we would have a skit night one night, and you'd walk out of that room with like stitches, like my cheeks would be hurting and my belly would be hurting from the amount of laughter. Nobody had cell phones, so none of that stuff ever got recorded, right? So you were never afraid to have like a picture that you don't want on social media. So that has really changed the environment. So my stories are more probably related to the stupid things basically that we did off field when we were young. And I tend to talk more about them than the actual, on-field experiences because there are so many, and I can't remember them all, to be honest. But yeah, they're all very different and unique.
Well, whatever you did on and off the pitch warranted a call from Rugby Canada's Hall of Fame in 2018. Played with some
Yeah.
impressive teams. Obviously left your mark on the game in Canada, and you still are.
Mm-hmm.
What does that selection mean to you? Like, how does that rank in your personal achievement file?
Yeah, it's massive. It's truly an honor, right? Only a few lucky members and maybe some more deserving ones make it to that level of recognition. It was a great dinner and event. My mom came into town for it. She lives out of Toronto, so she flew into it. I had my husband, Dean, at it. And it was just a good time to sit down, have a meal with ex-teammates, people that have been in the game for a really long time. So there was lots of press leading up to it, so you felt like a bit special as well, right? But yeah, it's a great honor, and there's not that many female athletes on that Hall of Fame. There's starting to be more, which is fantastic. There's some great nominations for the upcoming year. But yeah, it's good to be recognized. The people that really know me, I'm hopefully people wouldn't think I'm that humble. I don't talk a lot about my awards and recognitions as much, but it is great to be recognized, and it was a great night. I think of it very fondly.
Beautiful. So you're coaching now. You're on the coaching squad for the women's team. You coach there at UBC,
Mm-hmm.
and you were also selected for the World Rugby Coaching Initiative, which is an internship program for the Rugby World Cup here in 2021.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about what that initiative is and what that can do for you and our game in Canada on the women's side?
Yeah, so there's a couple of pieces to that particular answer, Jamie. So one, I took on the UBC head coach position after Leslie McKenzie left, and I used to play rugby with Leslie McKenzie on the national team. She's over in Japan now doing some great things.
She's going to be on eventually too.
There you go. So she's good times. I saw her last year when I went to a conference in Tokyo, and we had a bunch of beers, and it was fun to just see her again. Hopefully we'll meet her in New Zealand in next September. Yeah, so taking on that program was massive for me. I'd never really been a head coach at that point. And the program, didn't have a lot of success in the past. The athletes that we did have were very academically driven, and they enjoyed rugby, but they weren't there for the rugby. And it's a very different situation here now with the current athletes at UBC. A lot of the women that we draw are really keen to come here for the rugby, and obviously the education is important as well. But the type of athlete has really changed in the last few years. And that's one of the things I've been noticing is rugby players now are way more skilled, way more fit than they ever have been in the past. And that's kudos to all the good coaches that are doing some groundwork at grassroots levels all the way to university, high school, and so forth. But taking on that program really opened my eyes to, how to properly manage a program and how to grow the foundation of the sport and having some better ties with provincial unions and clubs and how to really raise that varsity age player. So it gave me a great appreciation for the long-term athlete development, right? Because as a coach, we talk about these things, but to actually put some effort into developing it. And we have some really great people here at BC, Darcy Patterson being one of them that has put a lot of time and effort into that. And particularly in the women's, right? Because we have lots of great talented athletes that would have in the past not picked rugby as their main sport, right? They would have gone to hockey or basketball, or if they had the height, maybe volleyball as well. But now women, good athletes, are picking rugby as their primary sport, and that's really exciting. So taking that program on just opened my eyes a little bit more about, how do you actually create a program? And then I finally convinced some people at athletics to hire a full-time coach, because I was a full-time faculty member in the School of Kinesiology, and that's really my career. I get paid to do that job, and I love it, but I always want to supplement it with rugby because that offers me that balance that I've always had, even as a young adult moving on. And luckily they hired my husband. So there was due process there. I was not on the hiring committee. He got the job because he deserved it. He was the high performance director of BC Rugby at the time. So, and was coaching the U19 national kids. So good background there. And did some really good stuff in Saskatchewan as well with rugby. That's it. That's all I'm going to talk about, Dean. I don't want to pump his tires too much. But basically, he took on that program, and that opened me up to having some extra opportunities with the national team. So I am helping out with the national 15 squad as one of the unit coaches. And so being part of that national level coaching staff has been really fantastic. Working with Jack, Duncan, Kev, and Sandro has been really amazing. And I've grown from those opportunities, and I'm still growing from that. But I'm just collecting little, professional development from everything that I do. If it's, kind of rejuvenating a culture from a university team and creating a strong program, to working with elite athletes that already have the skill set, but also just fine tuning some of the technical things. All those things are kind of things that I want to keep growing as part of my game. So that brings me to where I am with this high performance. I'm getting there. This high performance internship program. There's definitely some gaps still in my coach development. And I think this program, it's been identified, and it's no surprise to most people that there aren't enough women coaching. And that's in every sport, right? I don't know the stats. It's probably less than 20% of women that are head coaches of elite programs. And this 1 year long program includes 12 other women, or 11 other women. I'm the 12th. We all come from different nations. We're all somewhere in the system of coaching at a high level, and you have to be nominated by your union to be part of the program. And we just started it a couple of weeks ago. So we had our introductory virtual webinar. And the aim is basically to grow the part of your game you want to grow, right? And so you have to do a self-assessment. There's a couple of ex-players and people that you're currently coaching with that are also going to do an assessment of you as a coach. And you're asked to identify a mentor. And I've actually identified Wendy Patton, who's the high performance director for the Canadian Sport Institute. She works here in the West Coast. And the reason I picked her is, one, she's a woman. Two, she has a great background in elite sport, and she understands the Canadian sports system. And she directs a program. And that's ultimately where I want to end up, is I want to be a director of high performance, maybe not like a Rugby Canada, but I also want to be able to somehow marry that to academia. So I do direct 2 masters here at UBC. One is the high performance coaching masters and technical directors. And the other one is a master of kinesiology, which kind of takes in grad students that are keen in performance sciences. So I do direct those programs, but I do really want to marry the two. And I think this internship is going to, one, help me broaden my network, internationally speaking. So working with some amazing women that are doing their thing and learning from them, and what's working for you, what's not working for you. Can this actually apply to the Canadian landscape? So that's one of the big aims that I want. And then I know what my gaps are in coaching and professional development, and hopefully surround myself with the people that can teach me more about those gaps. So it's a huge program. I'm excited about it. I know very little about it because we only had that introductory meeting. And we're supposed to stay in New Zealand for the duration of the tournament. And I'm sure we'll have a great debrief at the tail end of that tournament. But I'm excited to see how it changes my professional development, basically.
Well, it's really neat. Like it sounds like a really neat initiative. 12 women only, so that's very elite, very select.
Yeah.
You've lined yourself up with a great mentor. You're making all these amazing contacts. At the end of the day, you're just ahead just in that alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now it sounds like you're even looking at, you already run 2 master's programs at UBC. This could tie in somehow on a different level with those. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities there for you. It's really, really amazing.
Yeah, well, the thing with coaching is, let's be honest, like coaching is not a cookie cutter profession as far as the training is concerned, right? Like all the great coaches, came from 100 different like routes, right? So one of my overall aims, within the UBC system is to try to professionalize coaching. Like, being a coach takes a certain level of skill. Let's train those skills, and they're very trainable skills, right? And we have to have lots of practical experiences, but there's also some theoretical underpinnings that need to be highlighted there. And my academic role will allow me to do that. But I think if I can, jump over to the industry, the sport industry, and get those applications over to the academic side, then it's a win-win scenario, right? Yeah. Often academics work in a silo and it's all research-based here, and they say it's evidence-based, but it doesn't work on the field. Like your true lab should be the rugby pitch, right? Like, so, to have those two working in silos is not really good for anybody. But the ultimate goal is to integrate those two environments, right? And optimize the learning experience. And it needs to be evidence-based. It needs to be based on science. And one of the products of this high performance coaching masters, hopefully, is to train the coaches and the technical leaders to first understand how to read literature and science, and then how to apply it to their environment. So you need to be working in that daily training environment, and you need to be experimental. You need to try things, but you need to have that critical analytical eye to really pull from it the true findings, the relevant findings. What are the applications of what you're doing? Right? Because as a coach, if you're not making an impact, what's the point? And how do you know you're making the right impact? So you have to be able to measure or evaluate that somehow.
Yeah.
Right.
It's an interesting endeavor for sure. I think it sounds like there's a lot of moving wheels there that when they come together, it's going to make for some excellent coaches whenever
I hope so. And we planted the seed about 8 years ago with David Hill. So David Hill works at a Canadian Sport Institute. And we met over a beer one day, as you do with other rugby coaches. And he's like, Maria, you're in the university system. Why is it that we don't have lots of coaching masters? Like, what is going on? And academia at times can be slow. We move as fast as icebergs when it comes to change. And I was like, well, I was about 4 years into my career, and I was like, I'm keen. I've got energy. Let's do this. Let's create a master's. It was about a 2-year endeavor to get the certificate created, which is a 1-year kind of 4-course degree. And then we laddered on the master's, and that was another 2 years of work. So I did a lot of the groundwork, and it's a lot of filling out forms and getting consultants to come in and marketing and all this stuff that I didn't know anything about. But I'm like a dog with a bone. You give me a goal, like I will find a way. And if not, I'll find the people that know how to get there and work with them to do it. So between Dave and I, we managed to get the certificate on the calendar. We now have the masters on, and we're collaborating with Coaching Association in Canada. We're trying to get COC on board. We work with OTP quite a bit as well. So these are, stakeholders in sport that are making a large impact, and we want UBC to be the training ground for coaches, right? Like, this is where you come to get higher education, to be better at your job, and you identify what that means for you, right? And we're trying to work with Laval University to offer the French version of that program. And there's some other institutions doing some great masters in coaching. But we're looking for a very particular type of grad student, a mature learner who has quite a bit of coaching experience already, or technical leader experience. So it's not for the 22-year-old coming out of an undergrad, if you know what
Somebody
I mean.
that needs experience. I'm pretty sure one of my colleagues is actually almost finished taking that. Coolin Hendra. Yeah, Coolin and I have been teaching together for over 10 years now. So he's talked quite a lot about the program, and Ray Barkwell, I believe, has been taking it as well. And he's shared lots of good stories and lots of good learning initiatives. So it's nice to hear from this angle as well. So.
We're about 6 years in, so we're kind of over the growing pains part of it. We've learned a lot of good things. We're making the curriculum as relevant as possible. We're adding a data analytics course, which is a big field in sports science right now. So cool. Trying to stay relevant with the times, and coaching, coaching can be archaic, but it can't be. It needs to be very, evidence-based and up to date.
It's going to evolve.
Completely. Yeah. So we're hoping we can have an impact at the coaching level, and that will trickle down all the way to the athletes, and obviously invested in more medal performances. But I think it creates a safe, positive environment for athletes that are involved in these programs, right?
Yeah, I love that. I've my undergrad's in kinesiology as well. I majored in sports psychology. Loved it. I love that aspect of coaching, just understanding players and trying to work with them. And sometimes you butt heads and it doesn't work out, but I love trying to figure out what makes them tick and how can I make them a better person and a better rugby player, or hockey when I'm coaching hockey, and et cetera. Yeah. So it's I just love that stuff. So that was.
Sorry, I was going to say, that's the cool thing about coaching varsity players and even, national team athletes. It's like, we're really invested in the human behind the uniform, right? Like, for the varsity girls especially, like we're trying to impact you as an independent, educated woman. Like, that comes first. The fact that you're a great rugby player, bonus. Many women will not make rugby a full-time career. We have some great athletes right now in the UK and France having a go at it, but it'll never be full-time. And sport life is always a very limited time, right? Yeah. So you can make the most out of it, maybe 12 years, but the average career is quite short. And then you got to move on and earn your dollars somehow else, right? And that usually involves some sort of education along the way. So we're proud of the product. We've had some great alumni come out of UBC. We've got some great alumni coming out of the women's 15s program. And I think that's been the approach with a lot of the people that I've been working with, which is why I keep doing it. A lot of what I do is volunteer basis. So unless I'm having a good time or really enjoying the people that I'm working with, there's probably no reason for me to really do it. I just want to give back to the athlete. I want them to have the fun, positive experiences that I have. And when I wasn't having those positive experiences as an athlete, I want to grow from those as a coach and not make those same mistakes, hopefully, as a coach when I'm coaching. So it's been an interesting kind of, wavy path.
I know we have to move on, but I think this is something you and I could probably chat about for like 2 or 3 hours easily. So maybe next time. All right.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's jump in here. So now let's do the quick fire. We're going to jump to the quick fire. Let's get a little bit to know more about you personally on the rugby pitch. I get about, 15 to 20 questions here. Mm-hmm. Are you ready to go?
Yeah. So you just ask me a question and I just pick a quick answer.
Well, a couple of them you might have to think, but most of them are going to be relatively quick.
All right.
Who's the best team you ever faced?
New Zealand.
Who's the best player you ever faced? Well, that's a stumper there, isn't it?
Yeah.
I imagine there's been some good ones, right? So.
Yeah. Can I pass and come back to it?
If I remember, yes, we'll come back to it. But
Awesome.
all right. Who's the toughest player you ever faced? When I say this, it's a 1v1. They have the ball, and you're just praying to God that they spill the ball or their boot comes undone or something. But that tough as nails person that you just regret it going head to head against.
Okay, so here's something I need to divulge.
Uh-oh.
No, this when I was an athlete, when I was playing, right? I didn't care who my opposition was. Like, okay, so back in the day, you didn't do as much team analysis or profile analysis. Like you would watch some film and be like, oh, France kicks a lot, France does this, New Zealand does, but not to the level of analysis that we now make our athletes do. So one, there wasn't as much film going around. I sound like a dinosaur, but there wasn't as much film around, right? We didn't do as much analysis. And whenever I came up against a team, I actually didn't really care who my opposite was. And I would have watched a bit of film on tendencies and stuff like that. So when you're asking me these questions, I'm struggling to find names.
That's fine.
Of people that I actually played against. Isn't that terrible?
Well, it was the team. I mean, rugby is the truest team game there is, right? So
Yeah.
your focus is on the team.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. What was the best match you were ever a part of?
I have two answers. Can I give you both?
Yes.
So one was when we beat USA on home soil for kind of the first time in 12 years.
Anytime.
And I was a rookie.
Anytime to beat USA.
It didn't mean, yeah, totally. It didn't mean a lot to me because I was like, on the team, yeah, we got to win. Canada at the time wasn't winning that many games. So we were like, awesome. But then I was watching my teammates that had been on that squad for like 6 to 8 years, and they were like crying. So it meant something to them, right? And I remember that win against the US in Saranac Lake. It was the first time we'd beaten them in 12 years. So that's a memorable game for me as a player. The other game that I remember in my head a lot is when we played France in Edmonton in the World Cup, and we beat them by a lot. And I think I scored 5 or 6 tries that game. Yeah, so it's probably the only, so I teach undergrads, right? They're like 17-year-olds, and they probably Google me, and they Google Maria Rugby, and they probably know that I played rugby, Marie Gallo Rugby. And one of the only videos that's remnant of my career is that 5 or 6 tries I had against Spain. So I think the title is like Maria versus Spain. And some of my athletes make fun of me all the time. They're like, hey, it's Maria versus Spain. And once in a while they'll play it in a team meeting or something. So that's one of the only games, or one of the few games that I think was pretty memorable for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I
was on fire that day.
One of those days when everything came together.
Hey man, I must have had something good for breakfast, and it just worked out.
Okay, that ties in any rugby superstitions. Obviously, it's not what you eat, but
yeah. Oh yeah, I used to shine my cleats.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't have that superstition initially in my career, and then it started as I was playing sevens, because I always we had some teammates on the team that would put on mascara and a bit of rouge before a game. I wouldn't necessarily do that, but I always believed look good, play good. So for me, look good meant shiny cleats.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
All right. 7s or 15s?
15s.
15s. What's your favorite rugby tradition?
I used to love the songs that we used to sing on the bus on the way to a game. Okay. Those have died out lately.
All right. So this is a caveat. If your answer is something to do with song, you're required to sing part of a song. Oh, come on. I've had everybody that's done this as saying.
Okay, so
I'll leave it.
I think it's been so long, I can't remember, Jamie. I used to work in Chicago, an old department store.
I know that one.
Okay, a man
don't work there anymore.
What's that?
I don't work there anymore.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
A man came in for some ABCs, and STD he got.
I haven't heard that one. That's a good one. All right.
There you go. I guess it's an STI now.
That's right. All right. What was your rugby nickname?
Oh, I had so many, Jamie. Bargy, RG, Tina, RG, Bargy, Tina. Those are probably the two big ones, I would say.
Okay, Tina
Yeah,
makes sense.
Gilo, Glow. Yeah.
Okay, all right. That's not bad.
Gallo's a fun last name to play around with, right?
Yeah, it is. I suppose there's a
Yeah.
lot of options there.
Yeah.
So this one you might not be able to answer, but it's the player you love to smash, but you might not remember players. But is there a position that you love to just attack?
Yeah, I think, so I played 12, 13, and 14 mostly. I used to love 13, but I used to smash anything with an England jersey on it, to be honest.
I approve of that answer. That's
All right.
all right. So the next question: have you ever done axe throwing?
No.
Okay, you're in a high stakes game of world domination and axe throwing.
Yeah.
Pick your three teammates.
Ooh, fun times. Okay, I'm going to pick Colette McCauley. I have to. She's my sister-in-law.
Okay.
She'd kick my ass if I didn't.
True love right there.
Right? That's a good one. So these are women that I've played with, right?
It can be anybody. It could be, yeah. A lot of people when I ask this question, they tend to go back to the teammates and stuff, but some people will
Sure.
stretch.
I'm trying to think like who was okay, Raquel Eldridge, because she threw line out. So I'm guessing you got to be accurate. And I'm going to go with that train of thought.
That's a smart pick.
Kimmy Donaldson. She's also line out thrower.
Okay. That's some very smart picks, I think.
Yeah. Good rationale. I don't know if we'd win the tournament, but
It'd be a lot of fun.
We'd have some beers and have a good time.
That's all you can ask for. All right. What's the most used app on your phone?
The weather app.
Weather app. In BC, it's always rainy. What do you need to check the weather for?
I'm not huge on social media. I think I managed to finally delete my Instagram account.
What is your go-to food?
I'm going to say pasta.
Pasta. Any like special dish or just pasta in general?
Ravioli or gnocchi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chips or cookies?
Depends on the day, Jamie, but chips.
What kind of chips?
Ooh, all dressed.
All dressed. All right.
Yeah.
French fries or onion rings?
French fries.
French fries or poutine?
French fries.
Really? I suppose you weren't born in Canada, so.
I've had a lot of good poutine.
Yeah.
But then I think of what's actually in it, and then that's a lot of running on the treadmill to get me that.
It's days worth of running on the treadmill.
Yeah, no doubt.
What's your favorite beer?
Oh, I have lots, but I'm usually a honey brown person.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's a guilty pleasure?
Chocolate peanut butter ice cream.
Oh, that sounds really good. Where's the best place for a post-match beer?
That's a good question. I would say the opponent's clubhouse if you just beat them.
Nice. I like that. What's your favorite song or favorite band?
That's a great question. I'm going to say the hip, the Tragically Hip.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Any song in particular or just the hip?
Yeah, 50 Mission Cap is something I used to play quite a bit. I grew up in Guelph, and they were huge in the 90s, and I probably went to like 7 or 8 of their live concerts when I was.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right, what series are you binge watching right now?
Right now I'm on The Great. It's on Prime.
What's that one?
It's about Peter the Great's son, and he marries this woman, and she's like going to take over Russia. She's an empress of Russia. Yeah,
it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah, my taste in Netflix or Prime is all over the place. I like drama, but I like documentaries and stuff. I was watching Trump as well. I'm on the 3rd episode of Trump.
I don't know if I can do it.
Yeah, he's an interesting man.
That's a good word. Yeah, I guess that's a play word.
Yeah.
All right, what's your favorite movie?
Favorite movie, Carlito's Way.
Oh.
Which is on Netflix right now. Actually, I watched it.
Nice. All right, I got 3 left for the quick fire.
Okay.
Maria, who would play you in the Netflix movie of your life?
Oh, great. Linda Hamilton.
Linda Hamilton. Nice. Little Terminator.
Yeah.
Nice. All right.
She would need a bit of a tan and some dye, but she'd do all right.
Who would play the leading opposite?
Like the leading opposite of me?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great question.
Is your husband going to listen to this? Will that sway your answer, or?
He'll probably listen to it and not tell me about it. Yeah, that's a great, I can't answer that one. Like, I don't know. Your guess would be as good as mine.
Okay.
The antithesis of Maria Gallo, I don't know.
All right. Last one. What would the movie be called?
Ooh, The Chronicles of Maria Gallo?
That works. That works. It sounds like it could even be a sequel.
Yeah,
Yeah. Playing career, coaching career.
maybe
Yep.
part deux,
That's right.
part uno, part dos.
That's right. So there's 6 of them then.
That's
All
too
right.
long. Most people don't have that attention span anymore.
That's right. All right. Thanks for those. All right. So we get a few questions left and we can wrap up here.
Awesome.
Um, so what are you currently, what's Team Canada doing with COVID happening,
Yeah.
prepping for World Cup 20? I mean, it's months away. Inoculations are rolling out. Are you prepping like game days coming or pins and like what's happening there? It's like
Yeah. So as far as I know, World Cup in New Zealand is happening, right? Probably be a good quarantine to get into that country, plus a bunch of other documents and to show along the way. But we have a lot of our athletes overseas. Actually, we've got quite a few in the UK, a few in France, and one or two in New Zealand. So the key is for them to be playing rugby right now. So that's really important. On the schedule, I'm guessing sometime in March or April, we'll have our top 50 camp and then boil that down to 40. And then we need some international matches, right? So hopefully as early as May, but probably more realistically June. Hopefully a couple of local competitions here and try to get a tournament somewhere overseas and start to hone into the World Cup. So it's kind of scary because we're not going to get as much preparation as we would have in previous years. And we were doing really good up until COVID hit, basically.
but the other teams will be in the same boat as you guys, though, right? Like all
Yeah,
the
except for Australia and New Zealand,
yeah.
right? They're getting tons of good rugby locally. So that's the shitty part, pardon my French, because that's really who we're after, right? And just that gap just keeps maybe getting a bit bigger. But I think we have some athletes making an impact in the UK. We keep watching a lot of their film that's being broadcasted, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So keeping an eye on those girls. We still have our regular check-ins online virtually, tactical conversations. The girls are meeting in small groups and units with the coaches. We're basically on block 2 of a 4-block kind of periodization plan. So the girls know what they need to be doing physically to prepare. They're getting their hands on the ball with local clubs if they're overseas, and then we try to make our opportunities as rich as possible when we get together. We also have Summer Christie working with the squad, who's a mental performance coach. So that's really been great through COVID. I know a lot of the girls have been struggling. I mean, everybody has, but athletes that need to move and hit things,
contest and
yeah. So they're in a different boat. And so I think they're, making their way through that darkness, and the mental health is hopefully good for everybody, and everybody's healthy and doing well and playing some good rugby. And we'll get to it in a couple of months here. We got to, I think the planning is over. We now need to start playing some rugby. The girls need to be together, spend some time together, and get to work.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at.
Just prepping like it's all full blast going into this. It's happening.
Yeah.
Let's be as prepared as we can.
Yeah, we have to be, right? If it gets taken away from us, we'll deal with that when the time comes. But if you're not doing your due diligence now, we're just going to be left behind. So from an S&C perspective, the girls are working hard. There's still regular testing going on. They're doing it remotely, reporting their scores, making sure that we go into that World Cup fit and strong and healthy and injury-free. Sounds like we'll be able to travel with a bigger roster this year, which is fantastic. So that bodes well for the pack. And we're kind of excited to hear what's happening with the Olympic athletes. We'll have a couple of transitions from 7s to 15s, so that will definitely boost the team. So they'll probably be wrapping up their 7s experience. I think the tournament is that last weekend of July, so they basically have August to come down from that Olympic high. And
in 15s mode.
Yeah, and we need to, I don't know what the understanding will be between the two different coaches, but basically we might want to get some 15s experience into these girls that do want to come play New Zealand after the World Cup.
Yeah.
And some girls have already put up their hands and are integrated into the 15s program already, coming to meetings, getting to be part of the tactical planning and the technical piece. So I'm pretty excited to see how this all kind of pans out. It's definitely not where we had envisioned ourselves if you had asked us 3 years ago, but we're making do with the situation. That's all you can do, really, right?
Yeah. Well, it's an exciting time for women's rugby for sure. With the Olympics, with your like the women's team, I think ranked third, and the women's 15s team are ranked third in the world. And the World Cup shortly after the Olympics are over, and you've got some tremendous athletes on both of those squads, and it's just going to be putting Rugby Canada, women's in particular, at the forefront of rugby in North America, and it's exciting for all the fans and all the Canadians that love, enjoy watching rugby. So we wish you nothing but the best prepping and showing over there. So we're excited.
Yeah, we're excited too. We just got to get COVID out of the way here, and let's get.
That's right. It's going. We're getting rid of it. It's going. It's gone.
Yeah.
All right. Who had the biggest impact on you as a player?
I'm going to go back to Sluggo, right? One of my first kind of national team coach. We lost him a couple of years ago, unfortunately, and he really has left his mark on the rugby community. And I find myself, preaching some of what he preached as a coach, and some of my best memories were on that team with him, right? So I would say he probably had the biggest impact on my rugby.
Nice. Yeah, his name's been brought up on a few pods. It's nice to hear.
Yeah.
So 2 questions left.
Yeah.
I really like this one. This is, I think, my favorite question that I ask all my guests. As a rugby player, as a person, fast forward 25 years into the future.
Okay.
All right. So you're like 40 at the time. So 25 years from now, you're only 40.
Yeah, got it.
But you're looking back, you're at a team reunion, and it's the 06 World Cup team or the 02, whichever one you choose.
Yeah.
What do you want those ex-teammates of yours, those old teammates, those old friends, those old girls that went into battle with you, what do you want them to be saying about Maria Gallo, the person, the player?
That's a great question. I would love for them to say she's had an impact on the game, right? And one of the things that I hope to do in the next few years is have an impact on the system. You know what I mean? Like, at this point, it's key to have strong women on boards. It's key to have women making decisions. So if I can have them saying, Maria's changed the game of rugby in a positive way, I would love that. And I would love them to say she was a tough-ass player and an honest person. I think I get that feedback a lot. I'm pretty transparent as a person, so I keep that going. I think it's a good trait in a human.
Those are 3 pretty good traits there that I imagine those teammates would be saying.
Hopefully.
We skirted around a little bit about your PhD. You got your doctorate in blood doping, which is really interesting. Were you still playing then? Like, how did you juggle your time? I find talking to, like, Sophie DeGoody, you mentioned her earlier. She played basketball, rugby, while going to university, juggling 2 sports. Tyson Bukaboom, same, hockey, rugby.
Yeah.
University. How did you manage to do all that?
Yeah, well, first of all, my PhD was in creatine supplementation.
Blood doping.
And then and then I came to UBC to do a postdoctoral fellowship in blood doping. Okay. But yeah, I mean, what was your question? How do you juggle it all? I don't know. Like, there's some pretty capable women out there. And I'm, I like to be busy, and I like my brain to be busy with different things. And so I don't really find it hard to have a couple of balls in the air. That being said, it's hard work, right? Like, there's probably lots of, I enjoyed partied when I went to university and had a good time, but there's probably a lot of social events that I could not go to because I'm in front of the computer typing away a project or something like that. But to be honest, I think the secret to it is it never really felt like work. It was always fun. I was always learning. I didn't mind going into the lab at 6 a.m. and in Edmonton when it's dark, and then leaving at 4 p.m. when it's dark, But yeah, just those long days, I loved learning. I was always challenged, and that just kept me going. And to be honest, a lot of it is, yeah, you can argue, okay, you obviously have to have the capacity, like the intellectual capacity to continue on to higher learning. But I think a lot of it was just the support network that I had. Obviously, family and friends come to mind, but also my supervisors along the way and the people that I surrounded myself with always pushed me to try my hardest. And that was never a barrier in my life, and I'm gracious for it. But yeah.
It's really cool. It's a really cool PhD for sure. You've led a very impressive life, and I wish you nothing but the best prepping for 2021 and getting through the rest of your school year, online, which is not an easy task, but it sounds like you're doing okay. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for joining us, Maria. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Amazing, Jamie. Thanks for having me, and all the best.
Cheers. Thanks very much, Maria. That was a lot of fun. Great time chatting with you. It was very knowledgeable. Love chatting kinesiology with you. Definitely love chatting rugby with you, and you're some great ideas there. But I just wanted to keep up the great work on the pitch and in the class at UBC, and while you're prepping for the Rugby World Cup this year with the national women's team. Coming up soon, we have our next pod will be Kelly McCollum and Leslie McKenzie, followed by Evan Olmsted and then Marissa Pache. And then we have a few others lined up that I'm trying to organize the call, still trying to get organized with Nick Blevins, Stephanie White, Hans de Goody, and there's a host of others. It's just a matter of me and them organizing times as to when we can chat. Lastly, as always, got to thank everybody for listening. It's great getting feedback from people talking about pods. I was on a Pacific Pride call last night with Jamie Cudmore and a host of others, and it was just nice hearing them chat how awesome it is to hear the rugby stories again, and I'll hear some from about Canadian rugby players, and it was nice to hear. So I just want to say thank you to the listeners. I want you to keep spreading that good rugby word, passing these stories around so that all of our players, men, women, coaches, admin staff, whoever is on, people know what they do. They know that they're from Canada, and they know that Canadians are good at rugby. Also need to say, as always, got to thank my son Rylan for supplying us with their tunes. They say it every week, 12 years old. It's his music program on his laptop, and he just decided one day to make me some new music. So I was very happy to have Rylan create the intro and outro music. And as always, feel free to request topics for future podcasts, guests, questions, etc. You know the drill. And lastly, this is Jamie. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane, and most importantly, keep on rocking.